Hi everybody, thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to be upgrading the radio in our Class A RV. Now, while we have a 2019 Tiffin Open Road 34PA that we live full time in, this video and the steps I'm going to show you will work on just about every Class A motorhome out there, no matter who made it, and it's made, not for sure on this part, but definitely all the gas coaches out there, and the concepts will work with those who have a diesel coach as well. So what we have here that came with this from the factory is a Kenwood / Garmin radio GPS. Liked it a lot. I'm a big fan of Kenwood, a big fan of Garmin, but I'm not a big fan of this combination. It's just something about it just doesn't work very well. And actually now the GPS side of this doesn't work at all. We paid about $100 last year to get the maps updated, and we're looking at having to do that again this year. And GPS side died, so no sense in spending time on map updates. It's time to do some upgrades. So the first thing I did, being a loyal Garmin fan, was I went to the Garmin website and see what they had available. Now their RV GPSs ranged anywhere from like $300 and up. And then you got to get a good mount for them and find a place to mount. I don't like having stuff mounted all over my dash, and I like a clean look. So I wasn't really a fan of those options. For that kind of money, maybe I just get a new radio. Now, to replace the Garmin here that's built in with another similar product is going to be about $1,000. And I definitely don't want to spend $1,000. For those of you who watched the Tech Talk University and Tech Talk Tuesday live streams we used to do, I'm all about doing things economically and efficiently. And spending $1,000 on a combination of radio and GPS that I didn't really like to begin with and probably wasn't much better doesn't make sense to me. So this is my solution, and I've actually used this solution in the past. Before I ever owned an RV, I used this exact same solution in a car I used to own, so I know it works. So I'm very excited to be able to do that with this particular RV. And what we're going to do is we're going to install this guy right here. It is a car Android player. Now, what's a car Android player? It is not a radio that has Android Auto on it. It is not a radio that does Apple CarPlay. What it is, as I grab it down here, it's an Android tablet in the form of a radio. So this guy right here, not very thick either, as you can see, compared to a normal car stereo. This guy right here is going to replace my Garmin / Kenwood radio. It's going to sit right in the dash, just like the radio did, and it's going to be my GPS. Now, still need an RV GPS, right? Well, we've decided to go with the Copilot app, and that runs about $30 or $40 a year, and a lot of people use it. As we found out about that, looking at different Facebook groups for RVers. So we're going to be using that. We've tested it out on our phones, happy with the results. So now we're going to put it into practice on this guy. So regardless of what you want to do, I highly recommend switching out your radio to this guy, because what this will do is basically everything an Android tablet will do, everything your Android phone would do, with the exception of it doesn't have a SIM card in it, so you can't make calls. Now, you can get some of these Android radios that do have SIM slots, so you can actually add it to your cell phone data plan, or your cell phone plan. Now, this will need continuous internet access unless you are using a app that uses downloadable maps. Continuous internet source, no big deal for us. We have a combination of Gypsy Wireless for AT&T, and we have Visible for our Verizon, so we pretty much have continuous internet coverage no matter where we're driving. So we have that covered, and if you're curious about our internet solution, there's going to be a link in the description below to our latest video on that, so you can see how we get internet on the road. So we're going to install this guy. So before we can install that, we got to take this one out, and these are really, really simple to do. First of all, you need to gain access to the back. That's easy. This panel right here, which a lot of people seem to think is a airbag, it's not. It's just an access panel held on with 4 pieces of Velcro. Easy way, take a screwdriver so you can get under it, pry it up, and it just comes right off. 4 pieces of Velcro. We'll set that over to the side. There's a trim ring here on the radio, and that just pops out, so we'll just pop that right out. Now the next thing is, with these radios, they have little catches on the side that mount those in. Now luckily, when Tiffin sells their rigs, they put all the owner's manuals and all the spare pieces in one big binder. So I have right here, and it's taped up so this stuff won't fall out, my owner's manuals for this particular Kenwood radio, the extra screws, and what we need right here, which is pry bars or whatever you want to call them to get the radio out. And if you don't have these, they're really just a thin piece of metal, as you can hopefully see there, really thin. And you could probably go to any car stereo store and they might either give you one of these or let you borrow them, because they have them laying around all over the place. So you got to find this slot in the side where it goes into and just put it in there on both sides. And then the radio will come right out. Alright, so as you can see, we've had a wardrobe change because it's the next day. Once I got the radio out, I got distracted with other things. So now we're coming back to it. So I've taken the radio out, and because the radio is, the new radio is so shallow. So here's the old radio, and see how deep that is compared to the new radio. Very different. Very heavy, not so heavy. So to install this, I went ahead and took the screws off of this panel so I can pull it out. And what Tiffin has done, at least I assume this is a Tiffin dash. This dash piece could be the same across a lot of different brands. I don't know. There's a mounting bracket, plastic mounting bracket fused on the bottom here and on each side to help, give some support to this cage, which is what the radio slid in. And I pulled the cage out, and the cage is put in pretty simple. There's a bunch of little notches here you can see all around, and those are just some, depends on the installer how many and where, but these are just bent down so they catch up underneath and then doesn't come out. So that's how technical it is for that. But we needed to take this out, and we needed to flatten those bent pieces out because we're going to reuse this to mount our new radio. Now the reason I had to pull this out to mount it is we're going to have to drill some holes in the side of this. You don't have to get them perfectly straight, just get them bent out so you can put this radio in. Make sure it fits. And ours does fit quite nicely, nice and snug actually. And you want it to fit, and you can see there's a little notch right there. So you want this bigger piece to fit flush with the edge, and so this part right here will be outside of the cover. So you need to make sure you get your holes lined up. Now there's a couple of ways to do this. There's an easy way and a hard way. Easy way is to make yourself a template with this. We're gonna reuse this ad for a local on-base restaurant. Like I said, I want this outside edge showing. So I'm gonna make this corner here flush, so I know I got it. Make sure this is all nice and flush. Again, it's just a quick down and dirty way to do it. So I can feel where those holes are, double check and look, and then I'll just punch through the paper where the hole is. Feel for the other hole, punch through, and that's it. Now I have a delicious looking burger that's also a template for me to drill the holes. Now one thing not to do not drill the holes inside your coach. Why, you may ask? Well, the answer is very simple. Drilling through this is going to create metal shards, and you don't want those laying around your floor because you don't want to step in them. You don't want your pets to step in them. So we're going to take this outside. We're going to drill the holes. Again, I have my template right here. So all I got to do is line up my template. I know where the holes are going to go, and then drill the hole out. And you want the hole just a tad bit larger than the actual screw that's going in. And the reason you want it just a tad bit larger is because you want the screw to go through that hole easily, because you're not trying to screw into this, you're screwing through this. Again, not rocket science, doesn't need to be exact. As a matter of fact, you can put the holes a little bit bigger if you're concerned about making a match. Alright, so I went outside and drilled the holes. Didn't really need to show you that because I'm pretty certain that you either have drilled a hole with a drill before or you can figure it out on your own. So we skipped that part just to speed up the video a little bit, but I've got screws in both sides. This thing is on secure and it's on level, so it looks good. Now, one thing we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and stick this thing in here, and the reason I didn't put this panel back is because we're going to have to play with these from the outside, because normally what you would do in a regular car stereo install was you would put this mounting bracket in, you'd bend these pieces back to hold this in place, and then the radio just screws in, the radio just slides right in and locks into these things here on the side. Now, since we are using what we have available, then that's not the case. But right now we've got the radio secure to the base. We could go ahead and put it in now, but I'm not. This is where it's time to hook up all the electrical connections. And the reason I'm doing that before putting this in is because this hole here gives me a little bit more light in here. Plus I also have a light right here because I'm old and I need to see things. Okay, so these Android based radios come with a lot of different connections here. As you can see here, this one, well, it's just a USB connection. So I plug this in the back and I can let that hang, or I can come up with a way to mount it under the dash. But I'm probably just going to let this hang in the back where you really can't see it, because I don't need it for anything. Okay, this little connector here, okay, when you see yellow most of the time, from an industry standard perspective, that means it's a video signal. This connector here, a bunch of RCA connectors here. You got one for a microphone. These are for speakers. Red and white are always speakers. And you also have right here two videos, one's an in, one's an out. So you can actually push a video signal out of this to another monitor. Now what you want to do that for is, say your co-pilot, your navigator over here on the passenger side, they want to be able to see this screen too. Well, you can buy a pretty cheap display screen from Amazon, probably like 20, 30, 40 bucks. If I find one, I'll put notes in the description for a link to one. We don't have one. Now this pink wire here is if you have an amplifier, and that provides power to your amplifier. Now we got this guy with all these connections. And this is more than likely what you're going to use. There's a couple of different ways you can hook these up. Of course, the best way is if you have an actual wiring harness. So I could actually just take this plug off, for instance, off the old Kenwood radio, because I'm not using it. I'm throwing it away. I can take this plug off, which is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to reuse this plug. So I'm going to cut the wires down here pretty low, so I got plenty of slack here. Then I'm going to connect these wires to my radio. Now how you do that, again, a couple of different ways. Now what I have here is, I just bought this from, I think, Harbor Freight. It's just a cheap terminal kit. It's got a bunch of different terminals in it. There's some where you can just connect the wires directly, and there's some that are spade and you can hook and unhook them. And it's really your choice. When I was installing car stereos for a living, well, for a part-time job, I always use the ones with the quick disconnects, because when somebody came back with wanted a new radio, I could just unplug that and plug a new one back in. I didn't have to strip a bunch of wires, so it was just quicker. For this installation, I am probably not going to do that. So we'll just have to see how this one goes. And the reason I say that is I'm using the available connectors I have. So I may use some of those, and I may use some that are just straight through. And I'm just doing that just to save a little bit of money, and I don't need to be carrying around a ton of these connectors. Alright, so as we're getting ready to wire this thing up, I came across something that's going to save us a lot of time. And that is, okay, this is the connector right off the back of the old Kenwood radio, and this is the connector that's going to go plug into the wiring harness inside the dash here. Now I notice that this connector is the exact same connector as my new radio. It's the exact same connector as my new radio. This may not be the case for whatever radio you buy. Honestly, even if you buy the exact same radio that I have here, these things come from China, and who knows. So always check the wiring diagrams before you hook up anything. Now this is not a perfect match, but all the wires that I'm going to be using are a perfect match. So the power and the speaker wires which are on this are all right here as well. So the only ones that are different are mainly these ones here and this is the old plug again. These aren't even used. So the ones that are being used are all in the right spot on both connectors. So I'm going to double check that again. I'm actually going to write it all out just to make sure, because the colors are a little different on some of these wires. Now the speaker wires are the exact same colors. The speaker wires are generally kind of an industry standard. Most of these wirings are industry standard, but sometimes you'll see a little bit different here and there. So never trust anything but the manual that comes with your specific radio to make sure that the wires are what you think they are. So with that said, this wiring just became super simple. I just need to plug this in, and I've plugged in my power, my grounds, and all my speakers. Instead of splicing a bunch of wires with this. But like I said, we're going to write it out and double check before we go forward. So I'm going to go do that real quick, and I'm going to come back and we'll get this radio done. Everything matches, we are good. So I have double, probably triple checked all this. I got the connector in, so we should be good to go. Now this piece down here dangling with this connector, I'm just going to leave. This is a park switch. This is what you normally would use if you want to watch videos and things like that on this radio. As a safety feature, you can't watch videos unless the parking brake's engaged. And so this thing right here went to the parking brake and would show that it's engaged. We're not planning on watching videos on this thing, so I'm not even going to worry about it. But just for the sake of future upgrades perhaps, I'm just going to leave it here and dangling. No worries. So I've got this plugged in, so now I've just got to figure out what to do with all these other connectors. So what are we going to do with all these other connectors? Don't need any of them, with the possible exception of one of the USB ports. So we still need some of these other connectors. For example, this one here has all the RCA jacks on it, but it also has a microphone jack. And if you want to use your radio for Bluetooth, to have conversations with people, then you'll need a microphone. So we're going to need this. It comes with 2 USB connectors. We really only need one. We're going to hook both of them up, and the rest we're just going to hook up anyway, because you never can tell what you may want to do in the future. And it's a lot easier to hook these up. You got a ton of space, obviously, because this radio is half the size of the original. Plus there's a ton of space in the dash you're going to see in a second. So there's really no need to try to find a spot for these that you'll remember if you ever want them. So we're just going to go ahead and plug them in and use them. And then we're going to plug this guy in, and we're going to do a test on this radio before we put it in the dash and everything else. And that's what I always recommend you to do. If you're hooking up electronics like this, go ahead and hook up everything, power, speakers, whatever the case may be, and make sure this device works before you go through all the trouble of putting it in the dash, tightening all the screws. I've seen too many people do that, and then they either had something wired incorrectly or the thing they bought just didn't work at all. So then you got to go back and undo all that work. So in the effort of just making this as quick and painless as possible, we're just going to go ahead and hook this up. And honestly, I should have hooked it up before I ever put it up on this brace, but I did it anyway. So let's go ahead and hook this thing up and see how it works. I've also went ahead and hooked up, this is the GPS antenna, and that just screws in right here. So the only thing I need to do now is plug in the antenna right here and plug this up, turn it on, see what happens. So let's do that. Okay, so now we moved in a little bit closer here so we can see what's going on. We've got the back of the radio. Here is the antenna, which just plugs right in there. No problem at all. I'm going to reach down here. Here's the wiring harness. And we're just going to plug this in. It only plugs in one way. So now we're going to go ahead and finally remove the protective film off of this. So let's fire it up. We got power to the radio. And as you can see, the radio is upside down. Actually, I just have to hold it upside down. So let's turn it around. And as you can see, it's booting up. It says Android, because that's what it is. It's an Android radio. So the first thing we want to do is we want to see if the radio works. So let's click on the radio. So it was silent there because I can't play the music because it was copyrighted. But trust me, the music works. So this thing's working. But is the GPS working? Let's see. Only the radio works right now because we don't have Wi-Fi. So we're going to hook up Wi-Fi. So we're going to click on Wi-Fi. And it's going to show me all the Wi-Fi networks. I'm going to click on our Wi-Fi network. Then I'm going to roll it over here and put in the password. Alright, so we've got this up. Now let's go check out our GPS. Like we saw a minute ago, I've got the Wi-Fi connected, and I went ahead and logged in with my Google account. And you're going to see the screen flash a couple of times because it's downloading updates and also installing some of the apps I want. Click on navigation. It's Google Maps, folks. So it is what it is. I mean, if you have Google Maps on your phone, it works the same way. So no reason to go into any in-depth on that. So I click back here to the home button. So that's it for now. So I'm just going to let this thing sit here for right now because I don't want to turn it off while the apps are updating. I just want to let it finish updating the apps. And once that's done, we'll come back and we will install the radio in the dash, button everything up, and call it a day. Okay, so now it's time to finish this project up. Go ahead and kill power here to the radio. I've already turned the radio off. We'll disconnect the radio. I'm going to go ahead and install the radio in here first before I button the dash back up. The hardest part of this is going to be to get some of these little brackets out to hold this whole mounting cage in place. So that's going to take some time. We're going to change camera angle so you can see what's going on, and we'll get this thing done. So let's go. Now I didn't disconnect the GPS. It's really not that long, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and run it through here, and I'm going to mount it up close to the dash. There's a adhesive backing here, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stick it up under there. So let's go. Oh, and here's my USB, one of my USB ports. I'm going to make sure I can get to that from the other side of the dash as well. So for now, we'll just pull these guys out like this. Make sure they're all through. And it's always best to go slow with this, just to make sure you don't break anything. All right. So we're going to put the radio in, but there's one problem. We can't put the radio in just yet because the opening here was flush for this mounting bracket, and we've put screws in the side. So the heads on those screws stick out a little bit, so it's not going to fit through. So we're going to have to get those screws in there somehow. So what we're going to do is we're just going to cut a little notch in the side of this plastic here on each side where the screw holes are. And if you have a Dremel tool, it's super simple. If you don't, you can use a drill bit, and it's still going to be pretty quick and easy. And we're going to take this very slow because we want it to be as minimal as possible. And the trim ring will cover most, if not all of it, if you do it correctly. So we're going to go ahead and just stick the radio in here as far as we can until those holes hit, and then we'll mark it ever so gently. Now that we've got it marked, take the radio out, get the drill bit out because I don't have a Dremel, and we'll get to work. Now the bit I'm using is the same size as the head of the bolts I used. So that way it makes it'll like just one nice clean circular opening. That, my friends, that might do it. Let's see what we got here. Doing good installs of anything, really, car stereos or any other electronics or anything like that, it's all about taking your time and trial and error and making sure it fits properly. Okay, that's going to work through perfect. So now I just got to bend back some of these prongs that I bent out to put the radio in. So we're going to push those back. Okay, so now we've got the radio in. We're done. Sort of. So we're just going to go ahead and mount the trim plate. And that just snaps into place. And it didn't quite cover the hole. I mean, there's a little bit on each side. The holes for the screws, it didn't quite cover it. It's just a fraction out. And honestly, a piece of putty, you take some putty or something like that to put in to fill in that hole, paint it gray, a little bit of modeler's paint perhaps, and you'll never notice it's there, and you probably won't notice it's there anyway as it sits right now. So the radio's in. However, we've still got to go inside, pry up some of those metal bars so the radio doesn't fall out on us. Now honestly, as it sits right now in there, because it's in there pretty firm, I doubt it would fall out anyway, but you want to do a proper install, and this is the proper way to do it. So let's properly do the proper install. Now these guys right here, we need to find something to pry up on the sides too if we can, and that'll hold the radio in place. It's already sitting on a shelf at the bottom. So, and plus it's so light, it doesn't really need a whole lot to hold it in place. So we're going to go ahead and do that because of the cramped space, can't really show you a good camera angle other than this. So let's get right into securing this radio. So just like that, we've not only installed a new radio, we have upgraded this thing tremendously, because now I got a tablet here if I need it. So if you have any questions or comments about this whole install process, leave me a note in the comments below. If you've done anything similar to this, I'd love to hear about that as well. If you're running any challenges with this, let me know. Now we're going to have links to this radio, this specific radio, in the description below as well. But there's a lot of different Android radios out there. They're all kind of, I don't know what you want to call them, small knockoff Chinese companies. You know, so Kenwood and, you know, JVC and Sony, they're not making these that I'm aware of. But this was $140 because I bought the upgraded one with more memory in it. So it was 140 bucks. So I'm all in $140. It was a pretty quick and simple install. Well, it wasn't for me, but it should be for you if you're doing the same thing, because you learn from my mistakes. So I'm going to be trialing in a few days. I'm looking forward to using this bad boy out on the road. And again, as always, thank you guys for watching. If you know somebody who's trying to figure out how to install a car stereo in their Class A, send them this way. It's a little bit more complicated in a Class B or C because you actually have a regular dash. But most of those have an install kit for them, so it actually makes it easier. So while it may be complicated in some respects, it should be a lot easier on the other side. I highly recommend, if you have a Class B or C, go to Crutchfield.com, not sponsored in any way, and they will show you everything you need to know about installation parts and things like that for your specific automobile. So thank you guys for watching, and we hope to see you at our next adventure.